Okay, so today we're going to look at something pretty huge, right?
Yeah.
The Roman Catholic Church and how they dealt with the whole Reformation thing.
Yeah, it was a wild time, a real turning point.
For sure.
Mm.
And, the stuff you sent over, I mean, talk about getting right into the thick of it. How they even begin to tackle that kind of challenge.
Well, the big question, right, is how did they kind of solidify their own beliefs and practices while also figuring out this whole new religious scene?
And the notes you sent over, they point to two big things.
Yeah.
That's the Council of Trent and then the rise of those Jesuits.
Right, on both of those.
So let's start with Trent. What was the whole point of that?
You can think of the Council of Trent as like this giant meeting of all the Catholic bigwigs.
Right.
And they had two main goals. One was to like really lay down the law on what Catholics believe, especially against all those Protestant arguments.
Like this is what we stand for kind of thing.
Exactly. And then the second goal was to kind of clean up their act a bit.
Yeah.
Deal with some of the problems that had kind of helped the Reformation gain steam.
So looking inward and outward at the same time. Now, the Knights mentioned some pretty specific doctrinal stuff, like they really wanted to clarify certain beliefs, right? Can you give us a few of the big ones?
Absolutely. So one really key area was this whole idea of free will. The council in Canon V, they basically say, hey, listen, even after Adam and Eve messed up, humans still have real free will, pushing back against the idea that we're just puppets.
So like a direct counter to some of those Protestant ideas about human nature.
Exactly. And then there's Canon IX, which deals with justification.
How will they handle that one?
Well, Canon X goes right at the heart of that justification by faith alone idea. The council basically said, hold on, faith is important, sure, but it's not the only thing you need for salvation. They really emphasize that you got to cooperate with God's grace and prepare yourself too.
So it's not just a believe in your good kind of thing from their view.
Right. And then there's Canon Seventh, which wades into this whole predestination debate.
Another one that got people riled up.
Yeah. So they flat out rejected that idea that God only gives grace to like a chosen few who are predestined. They said, nope, God's call goes out to everyone, even if not everyone answers. These canons were all about drawing those theological lines in the sand.
Okay, so they were setting the record straight.
Yeah.
Now, besides all that belief stuff, they tackled some internal issues too, right?
Yeah.
What were some of the big reforms they made?
Yeah, these were super important for rebuilding trust. One of the big ones everyone knows is they got rid of selling indulgences.
Yeah.
Those were basically like get out of jail free cards for purgatory, and selling them had become a huge problem.
Talk about needing to clean house.
And they realized they desperately needed better priests, more educated, more dedicated. So they really doubled down on training.
Smart move.
Yeah.
So outward and inward focus all at once. Now, the other big response you sent over was the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, right? Who were these guys and what was their impact?
So the Jesuits were founded by Ignatius of Loyola, and they were a different braid of Catholic order. Their impact was mainly from focusing on two things: education and missions.
Education, meaning like setting up schools and universities all over the place.
Exactly. They knew that education was a powerful tool for shaping minds and spreading the faith. So they founded some really influential schools on multiple continents.
And when you say missions, are we talking about expanding Catholicism, especially in those newly discovered lands?
Absolutely. They were like the front line for converting people in the Americas, Asia, all over. They played a big role in spreading Catholicism worldwide.
Okay, so if we're summing this all up, the Catholic Church's answer to the Reformation was this two-pronged attack. Clarify and reform your core beliefs through the Council of Trent, and then actively engage with the world through the Jesuits and all their education and missionary work.
Exactly. I wasn't just sitting back and taking it. They were actively reshaping themselves and the whole religious landscape.
So for all you listeners out there, think about this. How did these specific beliefs they laid out at Trent and all those global efforts by the Jesuits, how did those things end up shaping religion in Europe and the world? What happened because of these big strategic moves? Some pretty big stuff to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us.